Okay, class. So we are going to get started. So make sure that you signed up for an appointment for next week. So Thursday class, you guys are going to be signing up for either the Tuesday or the Thursday of week 4, so the 23rd or the 25th. And then if you're the Friday class that's watching this recording, you guys are going to sign up for Friday the 26th. And if there's any Tuesday and Thursday appointments available, you can also sign up for those as well, since now everyone here has already signed up. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit more about our week 4 conference week and kind of what that's going to entail. First, though, I want to talk about next week for my Thursday class. So you guys we will not be meeting next week. I believe next Thursday might be a flex day. It's something. The campus is closed. So we won't be able to meet at our regular time. But I do still want you guys to kind of get caught up on what I plan to cover next week. So you guys have two options. So you can attend my Friday class because that will be meeting. So that class meets at 11:10 to 1:20, I think, on Fridays. So that's an option if you're available during that time. If you're not available, that's totally fine. What I'm gonna do is I'm going to record the Friday lecture, and then anything that we do on Friday that you can't do kind of on your own, I'll make sure that there's an alternative so that you don't lose out on any points. So that's how I'm gonna handle that. So what I plan to do is early on next week, I will kind of look over what I plan to cover in class next week, make a plan, and I will send everyone an announcement and kind of let you know what you need to do to kind of cover anything that we talk about in class. So I will give you more information about that early on next week. So just make sure to check your announcements. Any announcements should go to your email. So as long as you're checking your email, you should be good. And I will also send out a remind message once I figured out kind of what we're going to do. But yeah, just so you know, Thursday we will not be meeting for class. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so let's talk about the conferences. I realize these dates are wrong. Okay, so on the 23rd and the 25th, so that's going to be week 4. Instead of meeting for regular class, we are going to be meeting. I'm going to be meeting with each of you one-on-one to discuss your first essay. And so the reason I like to do this is, one, I get to check in on each of you. I know it's really hard with the remote learning that you don't get that one-on-one time. So week 4, I'm going to have a chance to talk to all of you separately. We'll talk about your essay. You can also let me know if you have any questions or concerns about the class. And it's just a way for me to kind of get to know all of you a little bit better. So I wanted to plan ahead since we're not meeting next week. So basically of this week will be kind of our last formal or normal meeting. Then next week we won't be meeting, and the week after will be our conference week. And then the week after that, we'll start meeting at regularly again. So week 4, sign up for a time, sign up for a date, make sure you write down that time and date, because I'm not going to be able to remind all of you of your time and date. It's a lot of people to keep track of. So make sure that you write that down, you know when you're meeting. So on that date, you're going to show up to our Zoom conference. You're going to want to make sure that you have your essay done before that, and you're going to submit it ahead of time. So there's going to be a little submission where you can submit your final draft of your essay, and then I'll be able to open it up on my screen. You'll have it on your screen. We'll go over it together. We'll talk about it. You'll get a grade right there during our conference. And then you can ask me any follow-up questions. So that's how the conference is going to go. And yeah, that's basically it. So that week you only need to meet with me for that 15 minutes. The rest of the week you have just to work on your regular work. There will still be blocks due that week because we're going to get started on the next unit. So still keep up with the Wednesday, Sunday deadline, but class will not meet. So you only have to worry about showing up to your conference. Any questions about the conference or just the next 2 weeks?
Professor, I have a question.
Yeah.
So we have conference in week 4, so we need to have our essay submit it before the conference or during the conference so that you can see it and grade our essay?
Exactly. Yeah. So whenever you signed up for your conference, that is when your essay is due. And then I would suggest submitting it probably like 30 minutes ahead of that. Just so that if there's any technical difficulties, we're not taking up conference time. But that's basically going to be your deadline for your final draft. And today we are going to talk about kind of outlining your essay, doing all that stuff. So you're not expected to have your essay done at this point. We're only in week 2. But today we're going to talk about your outlines. You're going to be writing your outlines this weekend. And then next week, part of the thing that you're going to be submitting, even though we're not meeting, is you are going to be working on a couple paragraphs as a draft for your essay. And then I'm going to take you through kind of a self-check for those and let you know how to go through those and check to make sure you have everything. So you'll get more information before then. But yeah, whenever you sign up for your conference, that's when your final draft of your essay is going to be due.
I have a question.
Yeah, Gavin.
Yeah, for the essay, is there like a format how you want it? Like 1 intro paragraph, 3 body, 1 conclusion?
Yeah.
Like
So
and is there a page limit or like minimum that you want us to get done?
I'm going to go over the outline today. So there's not a page minimum, but there is like paragraphs that I want you to have. So I'll go over kind of, what my expectations are for that and kind of how to get that information. Because I realize we have not covered that yet. Yeah, no problem. Anything else? Okay. Okay, so let's go. Okay, so we got conferences covered. Next week we'll not be meeting, but there is going to be an alternate assignment that I'll figure out over the weekend. Okay, and then let's talk about what's coming up for the next, I guess, couple weeks actually, since we're not meeting next week. Okay, so again, if you kind of want a general overview, you can look at the class calendar and you can find that on the home page. There's like a link to our semester calendar. So we are in week 2 right now. As you can see, my Friday class is also getting canceled this week because of the long weekend. So you guys are kind of flip-flopping the next 2 weeks. So they're going to be watching this recording and then you guys are going to be watching their recording for next week. I don't plan the days off. I'm just dealing with them. Okay, and then so week 3, we will not be meeting, but you are still going to have blocks 5. So unit 1, block 5, and then unit 2, block 1. And then week 4 is our conference week. You're going to do unit 2, block 2, unit 2, block 3. And then week 5 will be back, regular time, regular class, everything will be back to normal. So it's just the first couple weeks are going to be a little bit weird. And again, I can't control that. I'm just, whatever. Okay, so let's look at what we're going to be doing the next couple weeks. So you guys have turned in your topic submission and questions. So you should have a general idea of what your topic is coming into class today. So make sure that you have that because that's what we're going to be working on when we're talking about the outline. That's going to be based off this topic here, obviously. Okay, so for Sunday, you're going to be doing your outline, which we will start today in class, and then you'll be able to finish over the weekend. You're going to be doing a reading and answering some questions, just like we've done previously. You're going to be writing your works cited page for this essay. So one of the things we'll talk about today is you don't need to use any research necessarily, but you will be using a quote from one of the readings as your hook. So you only are going to have one thing on your works cited page, and that's going to be the citation for whatever article you choose. So what I did for this unit, since we have not discussed MLA yet, is that I did the citations for you. You just have to copy and paste the one that you are using. So if you go to the Essay 1 Works Cited page, there is a link to a PDF with all the citations for all the readings that we've done in Unit 1. So all you need to do is figure out what article you want to cite. Sorry, just information here. So list of sources, open that up, figure out what article you want to cite. So say I want to use a quote from the Pauline Dwan article. I'm going to use that citation. That's going to be put in my works cited page, and then you're done. So basically I did the work for you. You're just copying and pasting it. For Unit 2, I will show you how to cite your own sources. We will be looking into doing some research just for this essay because, you know, we're so early on in the semester. I didn't want to stress you guys out too much. Okay, so that is the works cited page. So sounds scary, but honestly, it'll take you like a minute to copy and paste whatever article you're using. And then you're reading another article here, doing some questions. And I am actually going to open up, I have a essay 1 model. So like a completed essay that I got in a previous semester. So you can look at that as well to kind of see what the final essay is going to look like more or less. And then, so yeah, so you're doing your outline, your works cited page. And then for the next week, since we're not going to be meeting next week, I opened up the first 2 blocks of Unit 2. So Unit 2, we're going to be looking at urban legends on college campuses as a way to kind of look at how stories spread and kind of misinformation and that sort of thing. So the first couple blocks are just going to introduce you to the concept of the unit, as well as give you a little bit of introduction into doing research. So that's going to be the first couple blocks here. Actually, I'll open up all of these. So feel free to get started on those if you want. You're allowed to work ahead, but you don't have to. As long as you're hitting the deadlines, you're fine. Okay, so that's going to be basically the blocks that are due over the next 2 weeks. And let's see. Got that. That looks good. Okay. So before I kind of get into our actual like lesson for today, does anyone have any just questions again about the next 2 weeks, any of the work we're doing, anything like that? Okay. So what we are going to do right now is we're going to kind of talk a little bit about analyzing reading, critical thinking, and some of the terms that we're going to be using over the next semester when we're talking about stories or if we're talking about kind of any sort of text. So today I'm going to be introducing the concept of audience, connotation, and message. And these are 3 terms that are really useful when you're talking about any text, whether it's fiction or nonfiction or even news, and kind of knowing how audience, connotation, and message can kind of work together to change the way a text functions. So first, let's define what a text is. So a text is a subject or theme for discussion or exposition. So basically, a text can be anything that is sending a message to an audience. So that can be a story, it can be an advertisement, it can be a video, anything that has a purpose that was created for that purpose to send a message to an audience. So when I'm talking about text, I'm not just talking about like written word, I'm talking about any sort of information that's being sent to an audience and looking at how that information is presented. So yeah, so it can be words, images, sounds, video, it can be basically anything. Okay, so so we know what a text is, we understand basically everything's a text, everything has a purpose. So now let's consider audience. So the audience is the intended group of people that are meant to receive the text. So any text is going to have an audience that is likely bigger than its intended audience. So today we're going to be looking a lot at like fairy tales. So if you think about fairy tales, or at least kind of the modern day versions of fairy tales, who would you say is the intended audience of a modern day fairy tale?
Kids, children.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, kids, children, like yeah, they're made for young people. It doesn't mean that older people can't read these fairy tales and can't even appreciate them, but it just means that they are not the intended audience. So in order to fully understand the text, you have to look at it through the lens of that intended audience. Okay, so we got audience down. Next is connotation. So once you know who the intended audience is, then you can figure out how that audience would view some of the details in that text. So connotation is the idea or feeling that a word or idea invokes in addition to its literal or primary meaning. So again, let's use fairy tales as an example. If a fairy tale has, say, a princess in it, what connotation would the intended audience, which kid would be like modern day kids, have of a princess? Someone tell me.
She's pretty and has a dress, and there's a
Yeah.
prince.
Yeah.
She's supposed to
And
go
that they
after
need a man to rescue them.
Yeah, so yeah, now we're getting into like the social connotations as well, which is definitely true. So yeah, so if we have kind of just the more like physical connotations, yeah, maybe we assume a princess, we pretty, maybe she has like really good dresses and fancy jewelry or whatever. And then the social connotation might be that, yeah, you're expecting a prince to show up, right? You're looking around being like, okay, we have a princess. When's this prince going to show up? Because that again is the assumption that it's what kids are going to assume is going to happen. And obviously, connotations can change over time. So it might be that, in 20 years, stories have changed so much that the prince is no longer a big part of it. Or maybe that we have more prince stories, right? Maybe we have less princess stories, whatever it is. But right now, I would say if you've got a princess, you're expecting her to be pretty, expecting her to have a really nice dress, and there's probably a prince somewhere in the vicinity. So this is going to be different than maybe how people would have seen a princess 200 years ago when we lived under like a monarchy. But modern day kids are going to have this kind of very fantasy connotation of kind of royalty, because that's what they grew up with. They've never grown up in a monarchy. They've never grown up with an actual princess who has power over them. So it's all kind of fun and games when you're a modern day kid and you're looking at things like that. But that hasn't always been the case. Okay, so we have our text, we have our audience, we have our connotation. And then finally, we have our message. So again, any text is going to have a message. This might be just transmitting, information, or it might be a more kind of social message or a moral message that they want to give to the audience. So the message is a significant point or central theme, especially one that has political, social, or moral importance that is sent by the creator of the text to the intended audience. And texts often have multiple messages. The more complex the story, often there are going to be more complex messages happening. There's going to be, your central message, and then maybe you have some secondary messages as well. So this is especially, seen in fairy tales, right? That fairy tales are often kind of moralistic stories. You have a good guy, you have a bad guy. The bad people are punished. The good people are able to, live happily ever after. And so the message is also going to change as that audience changes and as those connotations change. And so we're going to be kind of looking into that today. So when an audience changes, how does the message and the connotation also change? Okay, any questions just about kind of our central ideas here? So audience, connotation, message. Everyone kind of got it? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these concepts and we're going to apply them to the Pauline Dwan article. Okay, so let's see. Blanca, can you tell me why? So in the Pauline Dwan article, what is the reason why the like modern day versions of fairy tales are so different than the kind of original versions?
They were intended for they were intended for adults, and so they were more gruesome.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the original versions of fairy tales were meant to be basically told in, a bar when people were drunk as a way to entertain themselves, because like TV didn't exist. And so yeah, people would sit around, they were drunk, they were, whatever, they were a bunch of adults, and they would tell these really kind of violent, gruesome stories to entertain themselves. And so, yeah, of course, a lot of these kind of original versions are very inappropriate to children because they weren't made for children. That was not their intended audience. But then as kind of time went on and, adults stopped really being interested in things like fairy tales because, we got more technology, now we have television and sports and all that stuff. these fairy tales were then kind of reapplied, and they were turned into more kind of watered down versions that were more appropriate for children. And now, those versions have the intended audience of those young children. And yeah, so we have these kind of two very different versions of these very similar stories. So the question that we're going to try to figure out is, how does audience impact the message and the connotation of these stories? So if we took two of the same story, so if we took a fairy tale, we compared the original version to the modern version, how would since the audience is changing, how would that impact the message and the connotation? So that's what we're going to kind of be looking at today. Okay, so first what I want to do is, so the story that we're going to be looking at today is The Little Mermaid. So I had you guys read on the original version of The Little Mermaid. It's okay if you didn't get all the way through. Basically, the premise is you have this mermaid, and the kind of beginning is pretty similar if you guys did read through it. She does, she is kind of a royalty, and she, dreams of something more than, her life down in the ocean. And so one day she I don't know, there's a ship, there's a prince, she ends up rescuing the prince, falls madly in love with him. And so she decides that she wants to live on land. She makes the deal with the witch or whatever. She gets legs. Now, can someone tell me what the experience for her in this original version of, like, what's her experience being on land? Like, is it pleasant for her?
It's kind of bitter because she watches the prince fall for someone else that didn't even save him, and she can't do anything about it.
Yeah. So so right away she basically gets her heart broken because kind of similar to the Disney version, that there is another person who kind of comes along and kind of takes credit for saving the prince. But yeah, in the original version, there isn't as much of that connection that she has when she's on land, that really she just kind of watches him fall in love with this other person. They also talk about the fact that in order for her to grow legs, it's really painful for her. And so basically, as she's walking around and like existing on land, she's in constant pain, watching who she thinks the love of her life is kind of falling in love with someone else. And yeah, it's just a kind of a really like heartbreaking experience for her. And then at the end, she basically has a choice that if she wants to return to the ocean, she has to kill the prince, or she herself will die. That's kind of the thing that she makes with the witch. And so she decides, I think initially she's going to kill the prince, but then she realizes, she kind of sees him laying in bed with his new lover and kind of can't do it. She's like, I can't kill him. I love him, whatever. And so she ends up dying herself and kind of living out her time in like purgatory. They kind of talk about the fact that, yeah, she kind of can neither go to the afterlife. So she kind of lives in this purgatory state for a while. And it's kind of like bittersweet that, she made this sacrifice, but at the same time, like she never had the love to begin with, right? It was all kind of in her head. Okay, so you hear that story, right? And that's really depressing. That's not kind of the love story that we get in the Disney version. So what are some reasons why like the story would be written that way? Okay, so let's kind of break down the details of this story. So in the original version, so we're still talking about kind of the adult version, what does the character want? Like, what is the character's goal at the beginning of the story?
To have a soul.
Yeah, she wants a soul. She wants to, and yeah, to because yeah, this idea that in order to have a soul, you have to live on land, and that yeah, she also just kind of wants to have this experience. That she wants something else in her life. What is she willing to do in order to get it?
She's willing to lose her voice for the potion to give her legs to be on land.
Yeah, so she's basically willing to sacrifice herself, right? That like if you don't have a voice, if you can't speak or communicate or even like tell people who you are, she's basically willing to sacrifice everything. She's, in order to be on land, she's going to be away from her family, away from the life that she knew previously. And she can't even like tell the person that she loves who she is, and in order to kind of, create a new life for herself. So she really is kind of giving it all up. So what connotation would the audience of the time have of this? Like, was it common for people to want a life outside the one they were born into, or to, seek out, to live far away from their families?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think that's still common today as well.
It is today. Was it as common though back when the story would have been written? Like, has it always been common for children to move away, to move far away from their families, or to want a completely different life than the one they're born into?
Maybe not
No.
as much as today.
I think it was
Yeah.
almost like a betrayal if they did it before.
Yeah, no, for sure. That, yeah, there's, and obviously not to say no one wanted that. Of course, there's always been, people who've wanted more than what they're born into. But as, like Caitlin said, that it was a bit of a betrayal. That, you often were born into a family where you were expected to take on the work that your parents did, whether that was a farm or a shop or whatever it was, a trade. And so the idea of wanting something more, of being willing to sacrifice everything in order to, selfishly kind of want what you wanted, just wasn't as acceptable, a couple hundred years ago. So this story really was kind of meant as a cautionary tale. Like, don't get too greedy. Don't be so selfish. That, be happy with what you have. And I know that sounds really weird, because nowadays it's all about like dream big and get whatever you want, and that's great, but it just wasn't the case back then. Okay, and then the conclusion of the story, right, is that she doesn't get what she wants. She doesn't get the prince. She dies. She never gets to see her family again. And again, that kind of solidifies the fact that, yeah, this is a cautionary tale. This is meant to warn away from this type of behavior. And so the intended audience at the time, like listening to the story, they are definitely being sent this message that, yeah, don't be greedy, don't be selfish. You need to, do what is expected of you. Otherwise, horrible things can happen. Okay, so that's the original, right? Now let's talk about the modern retelling of this story, so the Disney version. If you're not, if you don't know the Disney version, I'll kind of go over it, the details. Actually, maybe I'll have some of you guys. So if you are familiar with the Disney version, what are some of the differences in the children's version of this story?
Unhappy ending.
Yeah, so there's definitely a happy ending. Good. What else?
I'm pretty sure, like, doesn't he see that she's the one who rescued him, or am I mistaken?
Yeah, so there's definitely it's more complicated in the Disney version. So in the Disney version, there is another person who's trying to pretend to possibly be her, but he does have more of a connection with Ariel, the Little Mermaid. So, he suspects it's her, and then like he kind of goes back and forth of whether or not he thinks that it's her or someone else. But throughout the story, they are having like a romance together, right? They have the whole kiss the girl song montage or whatever. And so there definitely is like, there's a little bit more of like, oh, they're having a connection. Like, this is the love of her life. They are going to work out. And then obviously, there is some tension throughout. But yeah, there definitely is. They set it up more that like these two people are meant to be together. So at the end, when they get together, we're like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. So yeah, so that's kind of the big difference is one, I mean, she still makes the deal with the witch, she still gets legs. Now getting legs is a lot less painful for her, that, it's just kind of a magical thing. And then all of a sudden she is human and she can kind of walk around and she's not in any pain. And then, yeah, most of the tension just comes from the fact that she can't speak. But again, they set it up so that her and the prince do have a connection. And then what is the ending of the Disney Little Mermaid? What happens?
They marry and have a children.
Yeah, they get married, right? It ends up that she is able to get her voice back. She is able to get married to the prince. Her father gives her his blessing and says, whatever, I love you. And yeah, she basically gets everything that she wants. She gets her prince, she gets her family. She's got these 2 lives now, like above water and below water. And it's just everything works out for her. So, same story. Okay, so now that the audience has changed, right? So we're talking about modern day children. So our character kind of wants the same thing in this version. She's still willing to kind of sacrifice everything in order to get it. Now, is for an audience of modern day children, what connotation would they have of this concept of wanting something more or wanting to like be something better than what you were born into? Would that be something that would be acceptable for modern day children?
Yeah, I think it encourages them to like take a chance on their dreams and like go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a modern day kid, they're used to hearing like you can do anything. You can, be whatever you want to be. Whatever your dream is, you can do it. Like that's so much more common to tell kids nowadays. So they would completely accept that the hero in the story wants to do this thing and is willing to sacrifice everything. Like that's something that a modern day kid can completely wrap their head around. And then we have the conclusion of the story, which is that she succeeds, right? She's able to get everything that she wants. So the message of this story is basically the complete opposite of the adult version. That in the adult version, the message is don't be selfish, don't kind of rock the boat, don't mess with the status quo, just do what is expected of you, do what your family wants you to do, and that's what's best. Whereas this version of the story is the exact opposite, right? It's saying, yeah, question what your parents want, question what society wants from you. Take that risk, make that sacrifice, and it's all going to work out in the end. And you could argue that both of those messages are maybe a little problematic, but I mean, at least the modern day one, it is kind of a lot more open to allowing kids to like think outside the box. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So as we change the audience, the message and connotation are going to change drastically. So when we are looking at different texts, audience is definitely very important. That we always want to look at a text through the lens of its intended audience in order to understand it correctly. Because if we're looking at it through the lens of us, if we're not the intended audience, that's not always going to work out. Okay. Okay, so on Sunday, your outlines for essay 1 are going to be due. So I'm going to go over exactly what the outlines look like, what the expectations are for filling them out. I know some of you have gotten started already, which is totally fine. Still kind of tune in and make sure that you did everything correctly. And those of you that haven't started yet, you're still okay. They honestly shouldn't take too long. This is a pretty short essay. So if you guys want to follow along, I'm going to the Zoom module and I'm going to click on the Essay 1 Outline Google Doc. This is also in your Unit 1 of the block that's due Sunday. It's in both places, but they both have the same due date. It's just one assignment. I just put it in both places so we can find it easily. Okay, so Essay 1 Outline Google Doc. I will share screen. Okay. So if I click on that, it's going to open this. So I did make a tutorial video on how to fill out your outline. So I'm going to go over it right now, but if you're working on it over the weekend and you can't really remember what you're supposed to do, watch this. It goes into a lot of detail on how to fill out your outline. So this is a really good place to start if you're a little bit confused. Okay, so the first thing to note is that there's actually 2 outlines going on here. So this one is already filled out. This is one that I filled out to kind of show you what a filled out outline is going to look like. But this is the blank one that you're going to be filling out on your own. So just remember that. Don't obviously turn in my outline because I'll know. Fill out this one. And when you open up your outline, just like with anything else that you're doing individually, save yourself a copy. Otherwise, you won't be able to edit it. So I'm going to start with the blank outline, and then I'll kind of go back to the one that's filled out to kind of show you what it looks like. So I'm going to open up this one first, the Essay 1 Outline Google Doc. Okay, So you guys can all save yourself your own copy because you're going to be filling it out and submitting, obviously, your own version. So the first part here is just going to go over the assignment itself. So for this assignment, you'll be focusing on a single story that was important to you growing up. You will use descriptive language to tell your story. Then you will explain why the story was important to you growing up and how the story has continued to shape the person you are today. You are expected to provide specific descriptive examples to support your claims. So you guys all turned in your topics and kind of you semi-answered both of these questions in your when you answered your topics. So you already have kind of a head start on this. I'll look over your topics today, make sure that those get, so wait on those to get approved. And then once they're approved, you'll be good to get started. And what I'll do is I'll just, if you are approved, you'll get full points. If there's any issues, I'll just mark down a point. And then if you need to revise, you can do that. But mostly they'll be approved. It's not a big deal. Okay, so let's look at the different paragraphs. So first you have your introduction. You're going to have a hook, which is going to be a quote from any one of the readings that we've done for Unit 1. So usually you'll be able to choose any type of hook that you want. You don't have to use a quote. But for this essay, I want you to practice kind of using a quote within your essay, since we'll be doing that a lot more for future essays. So you can choose any quote from any of the, I think, 4 readings that we've done. Let me check. Because we have the Pauline Dwan, we have the Greg Ruth, we have the Elaine Reese, and we have the Carol Dweck. And then you will have the Sherman Alexie if you want to use that, but if you want to just choose from the first 4, that's fine. So you're going to just choose a quote from any of the readings that we did in Unit 1. And I would choose ones that are at least semi-related to your story. So if you're choosing a scary story, choose a quote from the Greg Ruth. If you're choosing a fairy tale or even like a mythology story, you can do from the Pauline Dwan. If you're choosing a family story, you can do the Elaine Reese. Or if you just want to use like one from like Brainology and that has to do with something, you can do that. It doesn't have to be exactly related because you're going to be making that connection from your hook to your topic. So as long as it's like tangentially related, you're okay. Okay, so that's going to be your hook. So any quote from the story, from any of the stories, any of the articles. And then you're going to introduce your topic. So basically tell me, just say, one story that I remember, loving to read as a kid was, and tell me what story it is. And then your thesis statement is going to state the name of your story and then tell me what it taught you as a kid and what it taught you as an adult. Those are kind of the 3 things that you're going to want to mention in your thesis. So you can write it however you want, but kind of the basic would be, well, I'll show you an example actually. So in my outline that I've already filled out, so this is the one that I filled out. So this is my hook. So I chose a quote from the Elaine Reese article. So the highlighted part here is my quote. So I just said in the article, what kids learned from hearing family stories by Elaine Reese. She writes that, and then I have my quote. So that's my hook. Then I introduce my topic, kind of talking about, the story and my relationship with the story. And then I have the thesis. So in my thesis, I'm stating the story, what it taught me as a kid, and what it how it continues to impact me as an adult. So for the story that I chose, this was like a family story that I grew up hearing. And so it's a story of the wedding ring, and the carrot was important to me growing up because it helped me connect with my family's past. And as an adult, I love the story for its messages about patience and the unimportance of material things. So since I'm going to go over it, so the story that I'm writing about for this outline is a family story. It's real, like there's actually like a newspaper headline that like someone saved from like 50 years ago. But apparently my like great grandparents were like farmers, and one spring my great grandma was planting, and she was planting a bunch of carrot seeds. And then when she got back to the house, she realized that her wedding ring was missing. And so she goes back, tries to find the wedding ring, can't find it. And so she ends up just kind of being like, well, whatever, like I lost my wedding ring. There's nothing I can do about it. And then I guess like 10 years later, So like time went by, whatever, they moved on. And then they were harvesting carrots and they pulled up a carrot and the wedding ring was like wrapped up in the carrot, like it had grown around the wedding ring. And so they were able to, whatever, she was able to find the wedding ring. And I guess like because it was a really small town, like the local newspaper like wrote a story on it. So they actually was like a newspaper headline from like my great grandparents about this like wedding ring and the carrot, which I think is like adorable. So yeah, so that's the story that I'm talking about here. So I chose a quote from the Elaine Reese article because obviously that talks about like family stories and why they're great. Then I introduce kind of my story here, and then I have my thesis where I'm talking about what the story is, why I liked it when I was a kid, and kind of why I like it as an adult. So that's what you guys are going to do with your own stories. So why you liked the story as a kid, and kind of even if you don't like love it as an adult, like what you think about it as an adult, or whatever you want to talk about. Okay, so that's going to be your introduction. Let me go back to the blank one. Okay, so hook, introduce your topic, thesis statement. Then for your body paragraph, you're going to have 2 or 3 body paragraphs. So your first body paragraph is just going to be your descriptive retelling of the story. So for your topic sentence, what I want you to do is give me some context to when you first heard the story. So maybe you tell me how old you were, where you were, who told you the story, kind of as much detail as you can tell me about like that, the framing of the story, like when you first heard it and kind of that experience. If you can't really remember that, just give me as much detail as you can. Obviously, everyone's is going to be a little bit different, and that's okay. And then the majority of the paragraph is just going to be your descriptive retelling of the story. So I already had you write out the story for when you submitted your topic. So if you already wrote like a good amount, I would say like, half a page or so, then you're good. You don't really need to do anything else. You can like just kind of cut or copy and paste it on here. But if you just kind of gave me the bare bones like details, I would add a little bit more information for your descriptive retelling because you want it to fill out a paragraph. And each paragraph should be about a minimum like half a page double spaced, and up to like 2/3 of a page, just depending on how long it takes you to tell your story. So just make sure that you have, that at least like half a page double spaced for your descriptive retelling. And then body paragraphs 2 and 3. So body paragraph 2 is going to look at why the story appealed to you as a kid. So what about this story kind of like what did you learn as a kid, or why did you like relate to the story? So the topic sentence is just going to state that. So you'll say like, as a kid, I loved the story because it helped me connect to my family, or because it made me feel empowered, or whatever it is. And then for your support, you're going to be giving specific examples from your childhood of how the story did what you said it did. So if you say that it empowered you, or that it, helped you to have an interest in whatever, then you're going to give 2 specific examples from your childhood of what that looks like. So let me show you kind of what that's going to look like. Okay, so again, this is the one that I have already filled out. So this is my descriptive retelling, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so my body paragraph 2, I said, as a kid, I love this story because it connected me to my family in a way that I didn't get to experience otherwise. Because I didn't live near any family growing up. So it was just basically the stories that I knew them from. And so I said, one way that the story connected me to my family was in the telling of the story. And so I'm talking about how like when it was told, and, my dad would tell the story and sit us all down. And he would kind of change the story depending on like who his audience was. So it was always fun to like sit in on different tellings of the story because it always changed a little bit. And I thought that was like really cool as a kid. And like, it really taught me a lot about storytelling, even like from a young age. And then so that would be like my first support. And then I said another way that the story connected me to my family was by introducing me to a way of living that was otherwise unknown to me. And so I kind of talked about the fact that like I did not live on a farm. I lived in like a regular house with my family. But I loved the idea of, living on this farm and like kind of living by the seasons. And like I just always had this like image of my like ancestors and kind of the lives that I lived with that was so different from my current life. And then I talk about how like I used to like to garden because I wanted to be like my great grandparents or whatever. So again, your support is going to be different depending on your story and kind of how you connect to your story, but you're basically just giving specific examples and like stories from your life that support the kind of lessons or the things that you liked about the story as a kid. Hope that makes sense. And then you're going to do the same thing for body paragraph 3, except you're going to be looking at the story from like an adult lens. So you're going to talk about like, as an adult, what do you see as kind of the positives of the story? So do you still agree with kind of the lessons that the story taught you, or do you still kind of like the things that the story helped you to gain an interest in, or whatever it is? So I said, as an adult, the big lesson that I'd take away from the story is the importance of being patient and not getting upset over superficial problems. So I'm focusing on kind of the message of the story and how, like, as an adult, I definitely relate a lot more to it than I did when I was a kid. Because when I was a kid, I could not wrap my head around like why a wedding ring was that important in the first place. Whereas like as an adult, I can see that like, yeah, it was really cool that she like didn't give, like she didn't care. She's just like, yeah, whatever. Like it's a ring, it's a piece of jewelry, it doesn't mean anything. And so I gave kind of some different examples from my adult life of times where I've had to be patient and kind of be able to overcome things that were more difficult, and how kind of the story taught me those lessons. So it doesn't have to be like an exact, like obviously I did not lose my wedding ring and it grew in a carrot. Like I'm not going to have the exact experience that my grandparents did. But like one of the examples that I give is like this last year when like everything went out crazy and all my classes went online and I had to kind of deal and just like, just kind of adapt to the new reality of things. And that like that it's a similar lesson, right? This idea that like nothing is forever. You just kind of have to like deal with what life throws at you, and not, dwell on it too much and just kind of deal. I also talk about like my own kind of wedding and that kind of situation. So again, if it's okay if you don't relate to your story 100%, but like, however you can relate to your story, however you can kind of share examples of how the lessons of the story impacted you, that's what you're gonna use here. It also might be that like, if you're talking about a scary story, maybe the lesson that you learned is just that like, you like scary stories still, and you still really like, horror and that sort of thing. That's also okay. So you could just talk about like 2 ways that your love of this story as a kid kind of impacted who you've grown up to be as an adult. So that's okay too. Okay, so that's all your 3 body paragraphs. And then for your conclusion, I recommend revisiting your hook. So this is actually what I recommend for all your conclusions. I know conclusions can sometimes be the hardest thing to write, because by the time you get to them, you run out of things to say. You kind of just want to be done with the essay. I totally get that. So what I recommend, and I will keep saying this for all their papers, start your conclusion by going back to your hook. So whatever quote that you chose for your hook, come back to it and just kind of talk about it now with like the information of the whole essay. So what I did is I went to that same quote and I just kind of took a little bit of it. So I said in the Elaine Reese quote, she writes, "The best way to tell stories to kids is in a detailed and responsive way." And then I just kind of focused on that and kind of talked about how that relates to like my own experience, blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to review the main points of your essay, and then you're going to just give some final thoughts. So for this topic, since it's like a narrative essay, it's like personal, I would just kind of maybe talk about the importance of storytelling kind of in your life, and your thoughts on how stories have changed since you were a kid, and kind of for people that are kids now, something like that, where you kind of just talk about the importance of this topic and kind of your thoughts on it. Okay,
Professor, can it still be a story that happened with us personally, not something that was told to us or something that we read in a book? It does
is
have
it
deep meaning though?
is it something that just happened, or is it something from like
No,
your past?
something from when I was a child that taught me a lesson and that I still think about pretty much as an adult.
Yeah. No, I think that would work. Yeah, as long as it's something in your past and something that impacted you as a kid, I think that would work fine.
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so that is what you're going to be filling out for Sunday. Again, it's only a 5-paragraph essay. You can feel free to kind of look at the sample one to kind of see how much information to give. And the more information you give on your outline, the less work it's going to be to actually write your essay, because then all you really have to do is put these parts together, maybe add some transitions in between, but like the essay is mostly written for you. So that's what I would recommend, is just like give this as much kind of effort as possible, because it's really, you're going to be happy you don't have to spend a bunch of time writing the essay. Okay, so this is going to be due Sunday. On Monday, I will go over all your outlines and I'll give feedback on all of them. So if there's any issues, anything missing, I'll let you know and you'll have a chance to revise. And then the following week, so next week is week 3, week 4 is when your final draft is going to be due. And really the only thing you're going to be doing between turning in your outline and turning in your final draft is I am going to have you submit 2 rough draft paragraphs. For essay 1, you're going to be turning in your introduction paragraph and then one of your body paragraphs. So either body paragraph 2 or body paragraph 3. And then you're going to submit it. You'll get points for having it done. And then I'll have you guys do kind of a self-check on it to make sure that everything looks good. And I'm going to try to make sure that I can take a look at all of them. But if not, at the minimum, I'll kind of show you how to go through them yourselves and kind of check for the different elements.